Good morning. This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Care Notes with Doug Wilber. And Doug, you told me that you had a special title for today. And I love it because it's starting to mean something to me as I'm aging. If aging was a country, the unwritten laws of growing old. Wow, what we don't know about growing old.
That's for sure. Well, I want to welcome people to Care Notes. It's obviously a podcast where we explore the quiet truths, the those extraordinary moments, and the human stories that shape aging and home care. And I'm very grateful to be here today. And it's that time of year. We're near the holidays, and just the gratefulness that I have the position that I do, and being able to start a company that helps people. And that not everyone has work is necessary, but not everyone necessarily tangibly sees what their work does. And I have that opportunity to tangibly see what my work actually can do in people's lives. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity. But I want today to kind of delve into our imaginations, and I want people to imagine something with me, and that is, imagine that aging isn't just a stage of life, but it's a country, a real place, has its own culture, its own rhythms, its own unwritten laws, being a place that every single one of us, unfortunately or fortunately, depends on how you view things, eventually enter. And somehow, some way, it's strange because we all know it's happening, that most of us arrive unprepared.
Yes.
And which is really kind of funny that we do arrive unprepared, because we all know it's coming. It's just we live life, I think, oftentimes in denial. But um, today, what I hope we can do is map that country together. And we can, and I hope we can approach it without fear. You don't approach it, as something pitiful. But if we can approach it with curiosity, with respect, and hopefully a deep sense of humanity in all of this, uh, I want to explore, if aging was a country, what those unwritten laws would be in that country. So let's go, first of all, law one. Time speeds up as you age. And I don't know if you've noticed that
Oh,
in
yeah.
your own. Yeah, and I think all of us, I remember thinking when I was a kid, um, or actually having that sense of feeling bored. And you would be like on summer vacation, and it's like, what am I going to do now? I'm bored, and the summers would seem like it would go on forever, and now summers feel like a flash.
Right,
Uh,
exactly.
and and so, why is it that time feels faster? Well, psychologists have a name for it. They call it chronological acceleration. Studies from Duke universities and others show that as we get older, our brains actually process fewer brand new experiences. And because novelty slows time, the absence of it speeds up uh, the time that
Okay.
we feel. Um, that's why days feel shorter, why years seem to kind of fold into each other like pages in a book, and and the hopeful part, and if people understand this, it can be a really important part, but we can actually stretch time again. And the way we stretch time is by creating new experiences, new routines, new relationships, even small ones. Those things help the brain create fresh markers. And when that happens, time expands, or it feels like it expands. Obviously, time is what
Right.
it is, but it feels like it expands because life begins to feel rich again. And I think that's a very, very important lesson to learn, is that in the time of aging, time is elastic, and novelty is the secret key to making that happen.
Okay.
And one of the things I've seen, expanding on this a little bit further, one of the things I've seen is the people that seem to do best as they age are the ones who, one, stay active, but who are actually developing new relationships. That is such a critical thing. They develop these relationships, and oftentimes they can see it at the funeral of the person. Um, because if you see, when you go to a funeral, sometimes you'll just see a handful of people, and it's not because the person wasn't dynamic and active and someone wonderful. It's that their circle shrank. And one of the critical parts of aging, and this whole kind of elastic um, concept on making time feel like it goes a little bit slower, um, is that novelty of the new relationship as well. And I can't emphasize that enough as being important. The second law is independency, or excuse me, independence is the currency of dignity. And one of the things, and I've mentioned this before, when I worked at Procter and Gamble, um, we studied what was important to people, and specifically to patients. And one of the things I kept on seeing in the research we were doing is that importance of independence. And now, as I've said before, we have to redefine independence sometimes, but independence itself is extraordinarily important. Um, and is backed by the data, both the stuff that I've done when I was at Procter and Gamble, my own interactions with folks, and just research in general. But independence equals a person's dignity. The AARP reports that 77% of adults age 50 or older want to age in place. Now, I've seen that number as high as 90%. I think the Home Care Association of America produced some information where it was at 90%. And frankly, I have rarely ever seen someone that says they want to be in a facility. There are, but it's extraordinarily rare. Um, and people want to age in place, not because it's convenient. It's not because it's cheaper, but because independence is emotional. It's our identity. It's being in that place helps them to understand who they actually are. And we all know this. I mean, intrinsically, we know this in ourselves, that home and how we interact is really important because that's ours. My mom, even when she was deep into dementia, she would look at her house where she was at, and she would talk to her caregiver, and she said, "This is my house." And it wasn't pride; she just loved it. This is my house, and this is where, as I mentioned, she had significant dementia, but she recognized that it was important to her. And I believe it was part of the reason that she lived as long as she did, was because she had that sense of independence, even with the help that she had. Um, Research consistently shows that autonomy, that ability to be able to make choices, is deeply tied to mental health. It's tied to self-worth and even, as I mentioned before, outcomes, physical and emotional outcomes. That's the reason why the ability to drive a car, or manage finances, or making decisions, isn't just a, a, a logistical change. It's a psychological one. And that's also why we have to redefine independence. It's helping people to understand what it is that they really want, which is, they don't necessarily want to drive the car. They want to be able to get to where they want to go. They want that freedom to say, I want to do whatever. And oftentimes they'll say, hey, Bill Gates probably doesn't drive his own car. He probably has a driver, and he's
Right.
very independent. It's just, but he does want to get places where he wants, when he wants to. And so if we can help folks understand that, then we will be able to help them understand that they are defining their own independence. But it isn't a luxury. It really is the currency of dignity, to to um, to be aging in place. Yeah. Um, Number three, and this is, uh, I think, as important as absolutely anything, and that is, relationships matter more than everything else. When my grandmother was dying, or she looked at my aunt, she was in the hospital room, hooked up to monitor. She had had a heart attack. And she looked at my aunt, and she just kind of panned around the room with her hand, and she said, all of this isn't worth a hill of beans. And and it was folksy how she said it, but what she meant is, those things aren't important. The truly important things, really are about the relationships, are about, you know things that are not things.
Right. Exactly.
So, if you boil down, the most famous, probably research study, or at least the longest study, it was an 85-year Harvard adult development study, and it was really looking at, over a long period of time, human well-being, and it reaches one critical conclusions, and that is that relationships are the greatest predictor of happiness and of longevity. It's not genetics, it's not wealth, it's not career, it's relationships. It's really connection, presence, companionship. Those things are critical. And remember when I said that one of the critical things I saw at is those people that have relationships and continue to grow in relationships. And it's really hard to do. We get comfortable. We have our friends that, many of us, from high school, grade school, college, and the it's so uh, difficult to break out of that and say, I need to develop something new. And because we're comfortable with what we already have established. But it really does make a huge difference. In the country of aging, loneliness isn't just unpleasant, it's actually dangerous. Um, Studies show that it increases the risk of dementia, it increases the risk of stroke, and overall early mortality. So this isn't a small thing. This is the thing. This is the most critical thing that we can look at. Um, the opposite is true too. Even one reliable relationship improves health outcomes dramatically. So if you want the right medicine, I will tell you the right medicine is connection. That is the most important medicine any older person is going to take, and anyone in this land would be taking on a regular basis.
Sure. Absolutely.
So, and the older someone gets, the more you hear, and that they talk about how as I talk to folks, um, how there is kind of um, that sense of loss that happens, and this is um, kind of goes to that fourth law, which is loss comes in waves. It's not events, and this is kind of little understood, I think, for those that are younger that haven't entered the land of the aging. Um, we often think of loss as that single moment in time, um, a date, a phone call, a sharp before and after. But the reality is, aging is made up of small losses, what gerontologists have termed incremental grief. And it's something like a spouse who's died 10 years ago, but it still feels present.
Right.
The car keys that you no longer use mark the end of a chapter. You can't drive that car anymore. Friends who either move away, they pass away, they fade away. And it's not all at once, it's gradual. It's one by one by one. And all of a sudden, you realize your world has shrunk to a very small place. And not only has your world shrunk, but those memories are still there, and they bounce around in your head. I had a friend that passed away 2 years ago, or 3 years, but I still suffer grief over that, because there's that thing where I would send a text, or I would pick up the phone and call, and that's not a possibility anymore. And here's this person that you had shared life with, and that's no longer there. That's not even a possibility. But here's the remarkable truth: older adults are often better at handling emotion than younger adults. And psychologists call it emotion regulation. And it tends to improve with age. I guess with age comes practice, or maybe it's just maturity. But we have, as we age, we have more resilience. The ability to accept things becomes a little bit better, and um, and we look for meaning in things, and so that helps us carry that grief, because if we can search for meaning in something, even that it can be philosophical, and oftentimes I think, and I can't emphasize this enough, um, it comes from our spiritual longing. It even drives us to our faith, and that helps us to actually see meaning and see the big picture, not just the little picture. But in the country of aging, loss is real. But resilience, at least, is the quiet companion walking beside us in this land. Now, the fifth law is the body ages unevenly. And I don't know if you've seen that, but most of us have. The body ages like an orchestra, where each section is kind of playing in its own tempo. And so, sometimes for some, the hearing may decline early, but the memory might stay sharp, or vice versa. The joints stiffen, but maybe we still have a good appetite, or 1,000 other iterations of this same theme, but we kind of and different people age in different ways. Now, there are things that can be done to help with that aging. I'm a huge believer in diet. That I think diet makes a big difference. I think there are anti-inflammatory diets, and if someone older is not following an anti-inflammatory diet of some sort, I think it's to their own detriment, because it does truly make a difference, in joint health and other things that whole thing of waking up and being really stiff. That's not necessarily inevitable. People can have some control over that by doing certain things, but our bodies are meant to. We have bodies that it was kind of the first planned obsolescence. The bodies are meant to grow old and end, and so that's just built in to all humans and in all life.
Right.
And so but this term there is a term for what we were talking about, a body aging unevenly. It's called heterogeneous aging, and it's really proof that no two people age the same way, and that no two systems within our body age in the same way either. So it's not really fair to compare how one person ages versus how another person ages. And sometimes you'll see people and they take a lot of pride in how they're aging. And that's a little bit silly, because they what they did is they picked the right parents in all likelihood. At least when it comes to sort of the genetic lottery. But we do have to understand that aging is personal, it's unique, it's uneven. And so it's also the reason why care needs to be individualized. Again, going back to why I started the companies, home care gives you the ability to individualize care in the most specific way possible based on this. Now, the law 6 is purpose is a survival skill. This is a really powerful part of aging, and it's backed by a ton of research. Purpose is not optional. Purpose protects the mind. It protects the body. The Rush Memory and Aging Project followed older adults for years, and found that people with a strong sense of purpose had slower cognitive decline. They had lower rates of Alzheimer's. They had a stronger immune system, and here's the critical thing: they had significantly longer lives. Um, and the funny thing is, they found that purpose doesn't have to be something that is huge. Like, you know, I'm going to be, the president of a company or something like that. It can be small. It can be almost feel insignificant at times. Um, it can be watering a plant or mentoring your grandchild, uh, sharing wisdom with someone who's providing care for you, um, following a routine that's important, taking care of a dog. One of the things I see is people with pets, they have a sense of purpose. I need to take care of this pet. And I really believe that makes a difference in their lives. I'm obviously pets, and will oftentimes love back, and show affection, but that purpose of taking care of an animal is a really big thing. So in the country of aging, purpose isn't a hobby. It's really a survival skill, and I guess probably a survival method is maybe a better way of talking about it. Um, Law number 7: the past grows louder. Uh, Not only does the past grow louder, but somehow it seems like the present becomes softer. And there's a real neurological reason for this. It's called the reminiscence bump. Um, it's a period, usually between ages 10 and 30, where our memories get anchored very deeply into our brains and remain vivid for life. Those are those critical times in people's lives. Sometimes that can get short circuited for emotional or other reasons, but that's oftentimes where people are going back to as they age. Um, they'll oftentimes revisit memories like who their first love was in childhood homes and military service and career milestones and family traditions. And it's not because they're stuck in the past. It's because um, it's in the past where their identity oftentimes lives and feels very present. And so when a caregiver is working with someone or a family member, and I guess I'm talking about a family caregiver, as well as maybe a hired caregiver, but engaging in storytelling and music and memory work, it's not just reminiscing what had gone on. Um, they're actually engaging someone where that person's mind is naturally going to with age. And so it is a way of engaging very, very active memories, and which helps overall. So in the country of aging, the past is not a retreat; it's actually home, and it feels like home to those individuals. Um, it's funny because it's oftentimes our short-term memory that goes away um, as we age. Those long-term memories are really, really rooted in the rocks. I mean, they're holding on, and it's pretty amazing. Now that's not universal or for everyone that has memory issues. but it is oftentimes very much the case. So, law number 8 is small kindnesses have a big impact. And then this is a really big thing. I think it possibly is my personal favorite. Um, the in the country of aging, and I think in the country of all our lives, the small things are oftentimes the big things. Um, uh, I, I I even think about memories that I have. You know, big memories aren't necessarily a trip to Disneyland or something that you remember. It's, a really close moment with a parent that came out of the blue, and it came with just being present with that person. And if you weren't just present with that person, that wouldn't have happened. But it can be things like a familiar mug, a warm blanket tucked with intention. It can be um, uh, slowing down enough to make eye contact with someone, and kind of maybe a an inside joke or a little bit of humor that says that you listen, that
Yeah.
you that you really heard that person. Um, Helping with buttons that are hard to button anymore, and you notice that they're struggling, and so you help them with that little thing. I know one time I was in deep grief. It was when um, my brother passed away, and it was funny because it was like um, some of the things that helped me get through that was someone holding a door a little bit longer so the door didn't slam in my face, or I'm talking strangers, or you um, walk in a place and someone gives you eye contact. Um, I know you and I have talked about this before, but where as someone ages, oftentimes they feel like they're not being seen anymore. And when and that's a really horrible feeling, that you're dismissed. And um and for heaven's sake, whoever listens to this, if you hear nothing else, don't ever do that. Give people that dignity. But psychological research shows that older adults develop what's called a positivity bias. Um, and I noticed this with my mom, that she would, as she got older, she actually became more positive. Um, and she noticed things, and she wasn't the only one. I've noticed this many times. Now, sometimes I see the opposite, but for many people, they'll tune into very meaningful, gentle interactions much deeper than in the past. Um, it that's that feeling of kindness doesn't feel small. It um, it's nourishment. It helps give them a sense of structure. It feels like they have safety,
Sure.
and but a part of that, again, I go back to what I said before, is being present with someone. And then law number 9: home is the last sanctuary. I know this,
Yeah.
and I believe this, and this is kind of what um, my life's work is right now. Um, Home is not just a location; it's a person's identity, it's their memory, it's control, it's the final sanctuary. The For someone who's older, a home is an anchor, a psychological anchor in the best of ways, in most cases. Um, and leaving it can be destabilizing and sometimes dangerously destabilizing. I've seen before where someone, as they aged, got moved into a facility. I've seen this a number of times with people with dementia, and they will be functioning very well in their own home with care. And a family member will say, it's time to put mom into a dementia unit. And so they put mom into a dementia unit, and 3 to 6 months later, I'm looking at the obituaries, and Mrs. So and so has passed away, and it's like, and you see someone that was doing well, not doing well, so often that I understand that destabilizing act of moving someone it had tragic consequences. And again, I've seen it enough that I believe it with all my heart that it is not a good thing in many cases. I'm not going to judge families to decisions they have to make, but I can say this is make that decision with the utmost of care and thought before actually pulling the trigger to do something like that. There's a documented condition. It's called relocation stress syndrome. There's a name for everything, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
So, but it's especially common in dementia, which is why I mentioned where a sudden move can cause confusion, agitation, rapid cognitive decline. If you have been around older folks, you'll see that they will oftentimes fight tooth and nail to stay at home. And I think deep inside of folks, this is why they do that, because they know that that is the thing that is kind of mooring them to safety, to memories, to other things. And it's the real reason why home care exists. Our goal is to protect the sanctuary of home for the people that we serve for as long as it remains safe, and really as long as the heart still recognizes it. And that's an important thing. The idea the heart recognizes it, because sometimes people aren't verbal or other things, but they still recognize this as their environment and their home. So the big thing is the country of aging isn't a faraway place. It's our future home. It's everyone's future home if they're lucky enough to make it into old age. And its laws aren't warnings that I was mentioning. They're the wisdom that we can glean to hopefully get into that land and navigate things as best as we can. We want to be able to slow down time with novelty, to protect your independence, to invest in relationships, to make space for grief and for resilience, to treat the body as the unique instrument that it actually is, to stay purposeful, to tell stories, tell our stories, to practice small kindnesses, and to honor the essence and the meaning of home. Because one day all of us, every single one of us, is going to be in that country, as I mentioned before. And the more we understand the landscape now, the better care that we're going to have, give, or provide for the people who actually are living there currently. And the better we're going to be prepared when we're actually there. I know that you've have experienced, some of these things recently with things. And does this resonate? Does it seem like it makes uh, good sense with some of your experiences?
I'm so glad we did this conversation today. As I told you before we came on air, um, I'm struggling with my older brother who's over 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
He's cognitive, okay? So he knows what he's thinking, he knows what it is that he wants, but he does need some assistance. And it took me a while to finally get his Medicare information. I read through it. He's got phenomenal benefits, which he's never used. It was like, whoa, we're going to make sure you use these. But he's always had a purpose, but his purpose has always been for others. And he's realizing now as he's gotten older that it's lacking something for him. And all of a sudden, with the death of our other brother, he felt worthless. And, I let him talk about that. He was like, explain it to me. Tell me why. What do you think you would like to do not to feel this way? And he finally got into therapy, which is helping.
Yeah.
And he's talking to me regularly. He reconnected with a cousin of ours who doesn't live too far from him. And all of a sudden, he's got this new purpose. And I'm excited for him. And he keeps reminding me, I'm 83 years old. Okay. Our mother lived to 96 and a half years old. So you could have 13 and a half more years. I said, it's not about how old you are. It's about trying to make the most of each day. And that's how I live my life. I've had some health scares this year, but I find the information, I do what I need to do, and I make the most of it. And it's a different way to looking at growing older. When I let my hair go gray this year, my husband's first reaction was, oh my, why? But yesterday, for the first time, we've been married almost 42 years. For the first time, I really heard him say, you are the most beautiful woman I've ever met. And you know what? That just made everything better. That gave me a new purpose. So, it is those acts of kindness that really change who we are. And I think for the holiday season, you gave us some really good tips on how to gift our aging population.
Good. Well, yeah, I want to wish everyone a great holiday, and I guess we'll be reconvening in about a month, right?
Yes, we will.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye now, everybody.
Thanks.